In the shadows of society, beyond the reach of mainstream culture and often hidden in plain sight, there exists a world of manipulation, fear, and control. One where groups of people are bound by oppressive ideologies, lost in the grip of charismatic leaders who promise salvation but deliver suffering. These are the active cults, the ones still thriving today, despite the years of legal battles, public scrutiny, and relentless exposure. Some of these cults have been operating for decades, weaving intricate webs of deception, loyalty, and isolation, where belief is not just a matter of faith, but a means of control. Behind the closed doors of these organizations, dark practices unfold, manipulating followers' minds, exploiting their labor, and violating their most basic freedoms. What makes these cults so chilling is not just their power to isolate and manipulate, but their persistence in staying active, adapting, and growing despite the growing awareness of their horrors. These stories are not just tales of blind faith. They are accounts of real-life terror that continue to play out today. Stories of individuals trapped in cults, manipulated by fear, and torn away from everything they once knew. They show the horrific lengths these groups will go to in order to keep their followers under control, through psychological abuse, physical punishment, and even isolation from the outside world. The leaders are not just spiritual figures. They are dictators who view their followers as mere pawns, using them as tools to build empires of power and wealth. As we delve into the stories of these active cults, be prepared for unsettling details that reveal the true nature of their practices. From hidden communities living under strict rules, to relentless brainwashing and shocking punishments, the cults that remain active today continue to spread their influence, feeding on vulnerable individuals and preying on their need for belonging, purpose, and salvation. These are not the stories of the past. They are the chilling realities of today. Welcome to the dark world of cults that refuse to die. The 12 Tribes, a cult that hides behind a mask of innocence. The 12 tribes might look innocent at first glance. Behind their white robes, homemade bread, and peaceful pastoral lifestyle lies a dark, hidden reality that has shocked many who have dared to uncover the truth. Founded in the early 1970s by Elbert Eugene Spriggs, who would later take on the name Yonek, this group appears to be a community of faith, centered around a desire to return to a more biblical lifestyle. They claim to follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, live simple, agrarian lives, and have tight-knit communities based on mutual love and respect. They run businesses that seem like ordinary, family-oriented enterprises, cafes, craft shops, and even a school. But underneath the facade of the wholesome image, something deeply unsettling is at play. The 12 tribes follow a belief system that mixes elements of Christianity, mysticism, and authoritarian control. Their ideology is rooted in a bizarre and dangerous interpretation of Scripture, one that includes corporal punishment and the absolute authority of their leaders. The group's leader, now in his 80s, continues to exert control over the lives of his followers, manipulating them into a web of submission and obedience. The group's practices are disturbingly authoritarian. Children born into the 12 tribes are raised under strict, almost military-like rules. The teachings of the cult demand absolute obedience from the young, often using physical punishment as a form of discipline. Members are taught that such methods are justified by biblical teachings and that they are the only means to purify and train their children for the kingdom of God. They have consistently justified child abuse as a loving and necessary action for spiritual growth. This includes spanking, beatings, and other forms of physical discipline, with the cult's leaders providing justification for it by referring to their twisted interpretation of the Bible. For children, this reality means a life of isolation, harsh punishment, and, in many cases, psychological and emotional trauma. But it doesn't stop there. What makes the 12 tribes truly disturbing is the level of isolation they enforce on their followers. Members are cut off from the outside world, with little to no contact with anyone who is not a part of the group. This extreme isolation ensures that members have no access to outside information, no alternative viewpoints, and no chance of questioning the validity of the cult's teachings. They are kept in the dark, literally and figuratively, and it's this manipulation that makes the group so dangerous. The group's businesses, which range from restaurants to small factories, also play an integral role in their operations. They don't just operate as a way to provide for the group, they serve as recruiting tools. People working in these businesses are often lured into the cult under the pretense of joining a community that values hard work, love, and friendship. The shiny surface, which appears harmless and even charming, hides the darker truths about the 12 tribes. One of the most disturbing aspects of the 12 tribes is their strict approach to family and relationships. Young members are often pressured to marry within the group, and those who express doubt or who attempt to leave are met with harsh consequences. The leaders use guilt, shame, and even fear to control their followers. Family members who try to leave are often ostracized, cut off entirely from their loved ones. The emotional toll is overwhelming, and the fear of losing one's family keeps many in the group, even if they begin to question the faith or the practices. In recent years, there have been reports of former members who have managed to escape. Their stories are filled with trauma, fear, and a sense of loss that they have to come to terms with for the rest of their lives. They speak of constant surveillance, a life devoid of personal autonomy, and the intense psychological pressure to conform. Many former members describe feeling like prisoners, trapped not by physical chains, but by an insidious system of thought control that made them feel they were inescapably bound to the cult. Perhaps most chilling of all is the 12 tribes' continued existence. Despite numerous investigations and public controversies, the cult has managed to avoid being completely dismantled. They are highly secretive and protective of their communities. And as of today, the 12 tribes are still operating under various names and in multiple locations worldwide. They continue to recruit new members, often through their businesses and local operations. Some of the group's most well-known businesses, such as the Yellow Deli, operate in plain sight, offering a charming, rustic atmosphere that hides the darker reality of what lies beneath. What makes them so dangerous is the way they operate under the radar. They have learned how to hide their most disturbing practices in plain sight, masking their authoritarian control with a facade of hospitality and generosity. While the authorities have tried to expose and shut down the cult, their deep-seated secrecy and manipulation make it difficult to fully eradicate them. And so, the 12 tribes continue to exist, hiding in plain sight, operating their businesses, recruiting new followers, and maintaining control over the lives of those who are ensnared. The true horror of the 12 tribes lies not just in their isolated communities and brutal discipline, but in the realization that, for some, there is no escape. The fear of leaving the cult is suffocating, the control unrelenting, and the mental and emotional scars from such an existence are lifelong. To those who have lived in the shadow of the 12 tribes, the cult is a waking nightmare, a world where love is twisted into control and devotion is a tool for domination. And for those who are still trapped within its walls, the nightmare continues. The 12 tribes are still an active and dangerous group today, operating in various countries and hiding behind seemingly innocent businesses. They are one of the more disturbing cults in modern society, not just because of their control over children, but because they continue to thrive despite public awareness of their abuses. The Church of Scientology, a web of control that keeps growing Scientology. At first it seems innocuous enough, just another religion, another spiritual path that promises enlightenment and self-improvement. Founded in the 1950s by L. Ron Hubbard, a man who once claimed to have unlocked the secrets of the universe. Scientology has built an empire of mind control and wealth over the decades. What began as an attempt to create a new form of therapy, something called Dianetics, quickly spiraled into a cult that would wreak havoc on the lives of thousands. From the outside, the Church of Scientology presents itself as a beacon of hope, offering solutions to life's problems and a path to spiritual enlightenment. People are drawn in with the promise of self-discovery, a life free of burdens, and a brighter future. It begins innocently enough. A person takes a free personality test, eager to understand themselves better. They are told their test results reveal their deepest issues they've never fully addressed in their lives. For many, this is the first step toward a journey that, once begun, they may never escape from. But as they delve deeper, they quickly realize the price of admission is far steeper than they could have imagined. It's not just about self-improvement. It's about control. And control is something the Church of Scientology wields like a weapon. Every lesson, every interaction, is designed to reel you in further, pulling you away from the world you knew and into a world where the Church's leaders have absolute authority over every aspect of your life. At the heart of this manipulation lies something called auditing. The process begins innocently enough. You sit down with an auditor who asks you about your past, about your memories, your deepest secrets, your most painful experiences. It feels safe at first, just a conversation, a way to let go of your burdens. But then, it becomes something more sinister. The auditor doesn't just ask questions. They're looking for something deeper, something that can be used against you. Every intimate detail you share is stored away, cataloged, and used to bind you to the Church. The more you reveal, the more vulnerable you become, and the deeper you go, the more it costs you, financially, emotionally, mentally. The price for these spiritual services is astronomical. For each new level of auditing, you're expected to pay more. Tens of thousands of dollars, sometimes hundreds of thousands, just to move forward in the process. And the promise is always the same. Once you achieve the next level, you will be closer to spiritual freedom. But it's a lie. There is no end, no moment of true release. Only more debt, more control, and more manipulation. As you climb through the ranks of Scientology, you're introduced to a more insidious force, the Sea Organization. It's here that the most devoted followers are sent to dedicate their lives to the Church, and once you enter, there is no turning back. You sign what is known as a billion-year contract, a pledge of eternal service to the cause, binding yourself not just for this lifetime, but for all future lives. It's a commitment that feels impossible to escape, because to leave would mean losing everything: your family, your friends, your identity. In the Sea Org, life is harsh, brutal, and relentless. Members are forced to live under extreme conditions, working long hours with little rest, in cramped quarters with little personal space. Punishments are harsh for those who step out of line. Confinement, isolation, and forced labor are just some of the methods used to break the spirit of dissenters. It's a system designed to strip away all sense of self and make every member wholly reliant on the Church's leaders. It's control taken to an unimaginable extreme. The worst part is that this is all done in the name of salvation. The Church insists that everything it does is for the greater good, that its methods are justified because they're helping you become a better person, a clear individual who has transcended the flaws of the human mind. But what they really want is power. Power over you, over your every decision, over your every thought. There's no escaping once you're in. Even if you manage to leave, the Church ensures that you are branded forever. Former members who speak out are harassed, stalked, and threatened. Families are torn apart, friends are lost. The Church uses its resources to destroy the lives of those who dare to expose its dark secrets. The press, the public, They are all treated as enemies. Scientology controls the narrative and silences anyone who challenges it. The world has seen it all: the mysterious deaths, the lawsuits, the accusations of abuse. But despite it all, Scientology remains a force to be reckoned with. Its wealth is staggering, its influence enormous. The Church continues to operate globally, using its massive financial resources to shield itself from scrutiny and avoid accountability. The public may see it as just another bizarre religion, but to those who have lived through it, it is a living nightmare. Even today, the Church of Scientology is active, more powerful than ever. It hides behind the guise of a legitimate religion, but underneath it all, it's a machine designed to control, to manipulate, and to destroy. People continue to fall into its trap every day, lured by promises of self-improvement and salvation, never realizing that the cost of their freedom will be their very soul. And for those who do escape, the scars run deep. The manipulation, the fear, the isolation, it never truly leaves. It haunts them. Because once you've been inside the Church of Scientology, you never fully escape. The fear of retribution, the trauma, the guilt, they follow you for the rest of your life. The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, FLDS, a cult of control and fear. Deep in the desert of southern Utah, there exists a place shrouded in secrecy, where the air is thick with the whispers of fear and obedience. The Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or FLDS, is a group that, despite its relatively low profile, is still very much active and dangerous. This is a cult built on a distorted version of religious teachings, using power and manipulation to enforce an iron grip on its followers, many of whom have been born into it and know nothing else. The FLDS is a direct offshoot of the mainstream Mormon Church, but its beliefs are radical, its practices abusive, and its influence terrifying. The history of the FLDS dates back to the early 20th century, when it broke away from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS, over the issue of polygamy. While the mainstream LDS Church officially abandoned polygamy in 1890, the FLDS clung to the belief that polygamy was a divine commandment. They believe that to achieve salvation, men must marry multiple women and have many children. In their eyes, the more wives and children a man has, the closer he gets to God. The man who would become the most infamous leader of the FLDS was Warren Jeffs, a charismatic yet terrifying figure who took control of the group in the late 1990s. Jeffs was not only the spiritual leader, but also acted as a self-proclaimed prophet, claiming to receive direct revelations from God. Under his rule, the FLDS became a tightly controlled, authoritarian society where fear was the driving force. For Jeffs, there was no such thing as personal freedom. Every aspect of his followers' lives, who they could marry, where they could live, and even how they could think, was tightly monitored and manipulated. At the heart of the FLDS is its practice of polygamy. Men, often older and powerful, take multiple wives, sometimes dozens. Young girls are married off to men much older than them, often in arranged marriages that they have no say in. These girls are taught from a young age that it is their duty to marry as many men as possible, that their eternal salvation depends on it. The practice of forcing underage girls into marriage is still rampant, even as the group tries to hide its activities from the outside world. For those who try to resist, the punishment is swift and severe. Family members who refuse to follow the doctrine of the FLDS are cast out and shunned, forbidden from any contact with their loved ones. This practice of excommunication is a powerful tool to maintain control, as it isolates individuals from the support of their families and communities, making them more dependent on the cult for their emotional and physical needs. Warren Jeffs took his control to frightening levels. He used fear and manipulation to keep his followers in line, even going so far as to dictate who could marry whom, often separating families and forcing women into relationships with men they did not choose. Jeffs himself would take the youngest and most obedient girls as his wives, some as young as 12 or 13. But his authoritarian rule didn't stop at marriage. It reached into every aspect of the lives of his followers. Jeffs imposed strict rules on behavior, including severe restrictions on things like personal dress, socializing, and even thoughts. There was a constant atmosphere of surveillance, and people were encouraged to report on one another if they suspected disobedience. Fear was the most powerful tool in Jeff's arsenal. Fear of hell, fear of damnation, fear of being cast out. Anyone who even thought about challenging the system risked severe punishment, from being shunned to being sent to isolation, sometimes even subjected to physical abuse. To keep his hold over the FLDS, Jeffs kept his followers in a state of constant uncertainty, claiming that God's will was unpredictable and that his directives could change at any moment. This led to a paranoid, oppressive environment in which every action and thought had to align with Jeffs' ever-changing whims. The teachings were consistently preached that the outside world was evil, that everyone outside of the FLDS was damned, and that the followers were the only true believers in God's Word. In 2006, Jeffs was placed on the FBI's 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list for his role in arranging illegal marriages of underage girls. He went into hiding but was eventually captured in 2007. His trial and conviction in 2011 for child sexual assault and his involvement in arranging underage marriages sent shockwaves through the community, yet the FLDS itself did not crumble. His followers, many of whom still held him as their prophet, believed he was unjustly imprisoned. After his conviction, his younger brother, Lyle Jeffs, took over the leadership of the FLDS, keeping it active and continuing many of the same practices. Even in the wake of Warren Jeffs' imprisonment, the FLDS continues to function with a similar structure of power and control. The group still maintains its isolated compounds, most notably the one in Hilldale, Utah, now known as the Twin Cities, and Colorado City, Arizona. These areas are highly insular, with outsiders having little access or insight into what goes on within. The compound is like a fortress, with surveillance and strict rules, keeping the outside world at bay. The people who live in these compounds have almost no access to the internet, limited contact with outsiders, and are kept in a constant state of ignorance and isolation. Despite years of legal and social pressure, the FLDS still thrives, with many followers believing that the Jeffs family is divinely ordained. Women continue to be married off to men they did not choose. Children are raised in an environment where obedience is the ultimate virtue, and those who try to leave face excommunication and a life of complete social and emotional exile. The cult is still active today, although its operations are more secretive. The fear and isolation that were so carefully cultivated by Warren Jeffs live on. For the women and children born into the FLDS, it's difficult to imagine a world outside of the confines of their community. To leave would mean not just physical separation, but spiritual damnation in the eyes of their faith. For many, there is no escape, and so the cycle continues. The FLDS remains an insidious force in the shadows, controlling the lives of its followers with the promise of salvation, while manipulating them into lives of fear, isolation, and abuse. It is a living nightmare for those trapped within its walls, and a chilling reminder that the thirst for power and control can transform religion into something dark and unrecognizable. The FLDS still operates under the radar, continuing to abuse and control its members. Though its leadership may have changed, its methods remain just as terrifying.